My Grandma Rose wasn't just family. She was the anchor of our lives, the keeper of our dreams. She promised us a future, a legacy to build a life we'd be proud of. But when we gathered for the will reading, that promise was shattered. The inheritance, the house, the money, the freedom was gone. All of it left to one person, my Aunt Sarah. It seemed like a betrayal from beyond the grave, but something didn't feel right. This is the story of how my cousins and I fought to uncover the truth and honor a promise that meant more than money. You won't believe what we found hidden in a secret compartment. If you've ever felt betrayed by family or been inspired by a story of fighting for what's right, please like this video. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a family experience that felt like a movie. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the rest of our journey to get justice for Grandma Rose. My Grandma Rose. The name itself felt like a warm hug, a gentle scent of her garden blooming in my mind. She was the anchor of our family, the one who held us all together with her quiet strength and unwavering love. When she passed, it wasn't a sudden, jarring crash. It was more like the slow setting of the sun, a peaceful fading that left the world feeling a little colder. I remember that day so clearly. The phone rang and my mom's voice, usually so bright and full of life, was a whisper. "She's gone," she said. It was simple, final. I hung up and just sat there, my mind replaying all the moments with her, her laugh, the way she'd cup my face in her hands, her endless patience as she taught me how to knit. She was a storyteller, too, and her stories weren't just about the past, they were promises for the future. "My sweet granddaughter," she'd say, "this old house, all the things in it, they're not just things. They're a legacy. A promise for your future." My cousins, Mark and Chloe, felt the same way. Mark, a struggling artist, saw her as the only one who truly believed in his talent. Chloe, a young teacher barely making ends meet, relied on her grandmother's quiet encouragement to get through the day. We were all a bit lost in our own lives, but we had a safety net, a beautiful promise that one day, we wouldn't have to struggle so much. Grandma Rose's inheritance was more than money, it was freedom. It was the chance to build a life we could be proud of, a life she'd been dreaming of for us. The day of the will reading felt surreal. The family gathered at the lawyer's office, a sterile, cold room that felt miles away from the warmth of Grandma Rose's home. The air was thick with grief, but also with a quiet anticipation. We all knew what was coming. The will was a formality, a final testament to her love. Our Aunt Sarah was there too. She'd moved in with Grandma Rose in the last few months, a move we'd all appreciated at the time. She said she was there to help, to take care of her. We were so grateful, so we didn't question her motives. The lawyer, a man with a tired face and a voice that droned on, began to read. He spoke of Grandma Rose's love for her family, her charitable donations, and her final wishes. He got to the part about the inheritance, and I leaned forward, a small smile on my face. This was it. The promise. The bulk of her estate, including the house at 12, Maple Street and all of its contents, is to be left to her loving daughter, Sarah Jenkins. My heart stopped. The air in the room seemed to vanish. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Mark's jaw dropped. Chloe's eyes widened, a tear of confusion and shock trailing down her cheek. My own mind went blank. What? It had to be a mistake. The lawyer continued, his voice emotionless, but his words were a hammer blow. She specified that she wanted to ensure that her daughter would be taken care of in her later years. I looked at my mom, a woman who had spent her life devoted to Grandma Rose. Her face was pale, a mask of shock and betrayal. My dad, usually so stoic, had a look of utter disbelief. Sarah, my perfect, grieving aunt, sat there, a slight, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. She didn't look shocked. She didn't look sad. She looked smug. The will reading was a blur after that. I don't remember leaving or saying goodbye to anyone. I only remember the cold rain on my face as I walked out into the street. The promise was broken. The future was gone. Grandma Rose's will wasn't a testament to her love for all of us, but a betrayal. It was a cold, hard slap in the face. But something didn't feel right. My grandmother, the woman who had spent her life making sure everyone felt loved and cared for, wouldn't have done this. She wouldn't have betrayed us like this. It wasn't her. It was a dark, twisting thought, but I couldn't shake it. The peaceful canvas of our family was shattered, and in its place was a canvas of doubt, suspicion, and a terrible, gnawing feeling that something was very, very wrong. The sun had set, and in its place was a cold, dark night. And in the middle of it all, I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this wasn't Grandma Rose's legacy. This was Sarah's. After the will reading, we all just scattered. The silence in the car on the way home was heavier than any conversation could have been. I tried to make sense of what we had just heard. It was like a bad movie, the kind where the villain wins and you leave the theater feeling sick to your stomach. But this wasn't a movie. This was my life. I spent the next few days in a haze of anger and grief. The anger was the easiest to feel. It was a hot, fiery rage that burned away the sadness. I wanted to storm over to Sarah's house and demand an explanation. But what would I say? Why did you trick my grandmother into changing her will? It sounded crazy, and besides, I had no proof. Just a gut feeling. My cousin Mark, the artist, was the first one to call. His voice was a raw mix of emotion. I can't paint, he said, and I knew exactly what he meant. His art was a part of his soul, and without the promise of a future, he felt lost. She wouldn't have done this, he repeated, his voice firm. I just know it. She loved me. She loved us. Chloe, the teacher, called me later that night. She was crying. I just got a letter from the bank, she sobbed. My student loans are past due. I was counting on Grandma Rose's money to pay them off. I don't know what to do. She wasn't angry, just heartbroken. I remember when I last saw her, she said, her voice shaking. Sarah was there, and she kept cutting me off. Grandma Rose seemed so tired, so small. It wasn't like her. That's when it hit me. We all had similar memories. The visits to Grandma Rose's house in the last few months of her life had been strange. We'd all been so busy, so we just accepted that Sarah was taking care of her. But now, looking back, the details were chilling. Sarah, always hovering, always present. Grandma Rose, a woman who had a fiery spirit, seemed so withdrawn, so quiet. I remembered one visit in particular. I had gone over to show Grandma Rose a new design I had created. Sarah was there, sitting in her armchair, her phone in her hand. Grandma Rose seemed happy to see me, but when I showed her my work, Sarah said, "Mom, you look tired. Maybe you should rest. She can show you later." It was a subtle thing, but it cut our visit short. Grandma Rose just nodded, a weary look on her face. It wasn't just us either. Our parents were in a fog of their own. They were grieving their mother, and they didn't want to think about the possibility that she had been manipulated. They were in denial, or maybe they were just afraid. A lawsuit, a public scandal, it was a nightmare they didn't want to live. But we were different. We had nothing to lose. Our future, the one we had been promised, was already gone. And we all had that same gut feeling. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a crime. I called Mark and Chloe and we met for coffee. We sat in a small cafe, the smell of roasted beans filling the air, a stark contrast to the bitterness in our hearts. We shared our memories, our suspicions. The more we talked, the more the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together. Sarah's sudden move, her constant presence, Grandma Rose's change in behavior, it all pointed to one thing: undue influence. We had to do something. For Grandma Rose. For her memory. For her legacy. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but we knew we had to try. This wasn't just about the money. This was about honoring the woman who had given us so much. This was about fighting for the future she had wanted for us. We decided to start small, to see what we could find on our own. It was a long shot, but we had to try. We had to prove that our grandmother, the kindest woman in the world, wouldn't have left us with nothing. She wouldn't have broken her promise. As I sat there, sipping my coffee, I looked at my cousins. Mark, with his artist's hands, and Chloe, with her teacher's heart. We were a team, united by grief and betrayal. The doubt was gone. The seed of suspicion had bloomed into a terrible certainty. We were going to find the truth, no matter the cost. We had to. For Grandma Rose, for her legacy, and for a future that was rightfully ours. The air in my grandmother's house was thick with memory. It had been weeks since the funeral, and the house, once so full of life and the scent of her lemon cookies, now felt like a museum of a life we no longer had access to. The family had split in two, the shock of the will driving a wedge between us. My parents and some of the other aunts and uncles were still in a fog of disbelief, unable to confront the possibility that Sarah could be so cruel. But Mark, Chloe, and I, we were a team now. We knew in our hearts that something was wrong, and we were determined to find proof. We started our search in the attic, a place Grandma Rose had always called her treasure trove. It was a chaotic symphony of forgotten things, old holiday decorations, dusty furniture covered in white sheets, and boxes upon boxes of family memories. We worked in silence, the only sound being the rustle of old papers and the soft thump of our hands on cardboard. "This is insane," Mark said, his voice echoing in the small space. "What are we even looking for?" "I don't know," I said, a box of old photographs in my hand. "But I know we'll know it when we see it." Grandma Rose was a woman of detail. She wouldn't have left us without a sign. For hours, we sifted through decades of our family's history. We found Mark's baby shoes, a lock of Chloe's hair from her first haircut, and my old report cards with her neat, encouraging notes in the margins. It was a painful and beautiful journey, a reminder of the woman we were fighting for. Just as we were about to give up, our eyes stinging from the dust, Chloe called out, "Guys, look at this." She was holding a photo album, its cover faded and peeling. It was Grandma Rose's favorite, the one she'd always keep on her coffee table. We had all flipped through it a million times, admiring the pictures of her life, from a young girl with pigtails to a graceful, wise matriarch. But Chloe had noticed something we had all missed. A small, almost invisible seam along the spine. It wasn't just a photo album. It was a lockbox of memories. Chloe carefully pried open the seam, and inside, tucked away in a tiny, hidden compartment, were 2 sheets of folded, yellowing paper. My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. The first was a small, handwritten note from Grandma Rose. Her elegant cursive, so familiar and comforting, stared up at us. "My love, my money, my legacy, all for my family's future." The words were a soft balm on our broken hearts. This was her voice, speaking to us from beyond the grave. This was her promise. She hadn't forgotten us. Beneath the note was the second piece of paper, a faded copy of an old will. We unfolded it with trembling hands, our eyes scanning the words. Our names, clear as day, were on the page. Our inheritance, the money for our educations, our futures, it was all there. This was the original will, the one that had been replaced by Sarah's. It was the physical evidence we needed. A wave of emotion washed over me. It was a mix of relief and a terrible cold rage. The betrayal was no longer just a gut feeling, it was a fact. Sarah, our aunt, had systematically and cruelly manipulated our grandmother, a woman who had spent her life loving us, into changing her will. She had robbed us of our inheritance, yes, but more importantly, she had tarnished Grandma Rose's legacy. We sat there for a long time, the old will in our hands, the weight of the paper feeling heavy and significant. We knew this was just the beginning. The proof we had found was a key, but it was just one of many we would need to unlock the truth. The fight was just beginning, and it would not be easy. Our family was divided, and Sarah, we knew, would not go down without a fight. But as I looked at Mark and Chloe, their faces grimy with dust, but their eyes burning with a new fire, I knew we had to do it. We were no longer just 3 heartbroken grandchildren. We were a team, a small army fighting for the honor of our grandmother. We were her legacy, and we were going to make sure that her love, her money, and her promise for our future were not lost to greed. My hands trembled as I stared at the old will. It was more than just a piece of paper. It was a ghost of a promise, a tangible truth in a world of lies. It was the key. But a key is useless without a door to unlock. We needed more. We needed a paper trail that led directly to Sarah, a trail of greed that was impossible to deny. "We need to go to her bank," Chloe said, her voice filled with a newfound resolve. Grandma Rose's bank. She was a creature of habit. The original will was drafted at her local bank, so the transactions will be there too. The next morning, we drove to the bank where Grandma Rose had done her banking for over 50 years. It was a place she trusted, a place that held her life savings. It felt like an invasion, but we had to do it. The bank teller, a kind woman named Margaret with a warm smile, knew my grandmother well. She was a part of our community. When we told her our names, her smile faltered. She knew who we were and what had happened. "Oh, sweethearts," she said, her voice filled with sympathy. "I'm so sorry. Your grandmother was a wonderful woman." We explained what we had found. We showed her the old will, the handwritten note. Her eyes widened with shock, and a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "I thought something was off," she whispered, her eyes darting around the bank lobby as if expecting to see Sarah. I tried to talk to her about it. I even suggested she have a family member present, but she just shook her head and said, "It's all taken care of." She told us about the last few months of Grandma Rose's life, how she would come in with Sarah, who would do all the talking. Sarah would stand over her, her face a mask of concern, as Grandma Rose signed document after document. The bank teller's words were a gut punch. It wasn't just a change of will. Sarah had been systematically siphoning money out of her account. With Margaret's help, we got copies of the bank statements. We sat in a small office, our hearts pounding, as we pored over the documents. The numbers were staggering. Large sums of money were transferred from Grandma Rose's account to an account with Sarah's name on it. The transaction started just a few weeks after Sarah moved in. It was a slow, deliberate bleeding of funds, a financial assault on a vulnerable woman. But it wasn't just the money. There were also records of Grandma Rose selling her most cherished possessions, her antique jewelry, the beautiful grandfather clock in her living room, her collection of porcelain dolls. Each piece had a story, a memory attached to it. They were not just things. They were a part of her soul, and they were all gone. "This is insane," Mark whispered, his voice trembling. "She sold her soul to the devil. She sold everything." "This is our evidence," Chloe said, her voice firm. "The paper trail. We have everything we need to prove she manipulated Grandma Rose. It's all here in black and white." As we walked out of the bank, the sunlight felt harsh and unforgiving. The world looked different now. The beautiful, quiet town we had grown up in felt tainted, corrupted by greed. We had found our proof, but it came at a price. The image of our grandmother as a strong, independent woman was replaced by the sad reality of a woman who was slowly being stripped of her dignity, her possessions, and her legacy. We were no longer just seeking justice for our inheritance. We were fighting for her honor. We were fighting to give her back the voice that had been taken away. We were going to make sure that everyone knew the truth. Sarah's web of lies was unraveling, and we were going to be the ones to tear it all down. Our grandmother's memory deserved nothing less. With the bank statements and the old will, we had the proof we needed. But it was just paper. We needed a voice. We needed a living witness to what we knew had happened. The only person who fit the description was Martha, Grandma Rose's caregiver. She had been there every day, a silent observer to Sarah's slow and cruel manipulation. It took us 3 days to track her down. We found her living in a small retirement community, tending to a small garden filled with roses, just like my grandmother's. She looked frail, her hands wrinkled and thin, but her eyes held a kindness that was instantly familiar. We told her who we were and what we were doing, and she just nodded, her eyes filling with tears. We met her the next day at a quiet coffee shop. She was nervous, her hands fidgeting with her mug. "I should have said something," she said, her voice a fragile whisper. "I should have told someone." We assured her that it wasn't her fault, that we didn't blame her. "You don't know Sarah," she said, a shiver running through her. "She threatened me. She said if I told anyone what I saw, she'd make sure I'd never work again. That I'd lose everything." Then she told us everything. She described how Sarah would isolate Grandma Rose, taking her phone away and refusing to let her have visitors. She told us how she'd intercept our calls and tell us that Grandma Rose was too tired to talk. She recounted how Sarah would watch over her grandmother like a hawk, controlling every aspect of her life, from what she ate to what she watched on television. She was terrified of her, Martha said, her voice breaking. Sarah would get so angry if she didn't do what she was told. She'd yell and scream. "Your grandmother, she just withered away. She wasn't the vibrant woman I knew. She was just a shell." The most damning part of her story was about the day the will was signed. "Sarah brought a notary to the house," she said, her eyes welling up with tears. "Your grandmother was heavily medicated. She was confused. She didn't know what she was signing. Sarah had to hold her hand and guide it to the line." Martha's testimony was more than just a recounting of events. It was a heartbreaking portrait of abuse. It was the emotional confirmation we needed. Sarah wasn't just a greedy opportunist, she was a bully. She had taken advantage of a sick, elderly woman. She had stolen more than money. She had stolen her dignity and her peace of mind. We thanked Martha, our hearts heavy with grief and a new sense of purpose. We had the evidence, we had the witnesses, and we had the truth. We were no longer fighting for a broken promise. We were fighting for Grandma Rose. We were going to make sure that the world knew what Sarah had done. We were going to get justice for her, no matter the cost. We sat around my kitchen table, the scattered bank statements, the old will, and Martha's emotional testimony spread out like puzzle pieces. The pieces were all there, and they formed a terrifying picture. Sarah wasn't just a greedy opportunist, she was a predator. The anger was a cold, hard stone in my stomach. It had been easier to be angry at Sarah when we didn't have proof. Now, with the truth laid bare, the anger was replaced by a deep sadness for my grandmother, for the last months of her life that had been so cruelly stolen from her. "We have to tell our parents," Chloe said, her voice filled with a new kind of certainty. "They need to know the truth. They need to help us." It was a risky move. We knew they were still in a fog of grief and denial. We knew they might not believe us. But we had no choice. This wasn't just our fight anymore. It was a fight for our family, for our grandmother's honor. We called a family meeting. Everyone was there, my mom and dad, my uncle and his wife, and even some of the older cousins. Sarah, of course, wasn't invited. The room was tense, the air thick with unspoken words and lingering resentments. We didn't waste any time. We laid out our case, piece by piece. We showed them the old will, the bank statements, the list of her sold possessions. We told them what Martha had said. Silence. The kind of silence that feels deafening. My mom, a woman who had always seen the best in everyone, looked at the documents with a look of utter disbelief. My uncle, who had always been a quiet, peaceful man, clenched his jaw, a muscle twitching in his cheek. Some of the family members began to cry, their quiet sobs a symphony of heartbreak. Others, however, were still in denial. "This is insane," one of my older cousins said. "Sarah is not capable of this. She's family. You're just trying to get more money." "This isn't about money," Mark said, his voice shaking with emotion. "This is about Grandma Rose. She was taken advantage of. She was manipulated. Are you just going to stand by and do nothing?" The room erupted into a whirlwind of shouts and accusations. The family was divided. Some of us believed the truth and wanted justice. Others were too afraid of a public scandal. But through the chaos, I looked at my mom. She was staring at the old will, her eyes tracing my grandmother's handwriting. She looked up, her eyes filled with tears, and her gaze was filled with a new, determined fire. "We're going to fight her," she said, her voice a strong, clear bell that cut through the noise. "We are going to take her to court. We are not going to let her get away with this." The decision was made. The battle lines were drawn. It was no longer just the three of us. It was a family fighting for its soul. We were going to a lawyer's office, and we were going to file a lawsuit against Sarah. We were going to air our dirty laundry for the world to see, and we were going to do it for Grandma Rose. After the family meeting, a strange calm settled over us. It was the calm before the storm, a quiet understanding that we were all in this together. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a quiet, determined resolve. We had a lawyer, a fierce and brilliant woman who listened to our story with a stone-cold expression. She looked at our evidence, the old will, the bank statements, the transcripts from our meeting with Martha, and simply nodded. "We have a case," she said, and her words were a balm to my soul. The lawsuit was filed. We were officially in the ring. The day the papers were served, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. There was no turning back now. A few hours later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, but something in me knew who it was. I took a deep breath and answered. It was Sarah. Her voice, usually so syrupy sweet, was a raw, hissing whisper. "How dare you?" she spat into the phone. "How dare you do this to me? To our family?" I didn't say a word. I just let her talk. She called me a greedy, ungrateful monster. She said I was trying to ruin her, trying to steal what was rightfully hers. She threatened me, saying she would make sure I never worked again, that she would tell everyone in our small town what a terrible person I was. "You're not doing this for Grandma Rose," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You're doing this for money. You're a liar and a cheat, and I'll make sure everyone knows it." When she finally stopped, a long, thick silence stretched between us. I took a breath, the first one I had taken since she started yelling. "I'm not doing this for money, Sarah," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I'm doing this for Grandma Rose. She would have wanted us to fight. She would have wanted the truth to be known." I hung up before she could respond. My hand was shaking as I put the phone down, but my heart was calm. She was trying to get under my skin, but it wasn't working. Her threats were empty. She had no idea how much we had. She had no idea that we were ready for her. The confrontation was over, but the battle was just beginning. The lawsuit was now public. Our family's dirty laundry was on display for everyone to see. The newspapers wrote articles with dramatic headlines about family feuds and inheritances. The gossip in town was rampant. It was a humiliating, terrifying experience, but we all stayed strong. We were no longer fighting a secret battle. We were out in the open, and we were ready. The court date was set. The legal battle that would air all our family's secrets was on its way. We knew it wouldn't be easy. Sarah would fight us every step of the way. She would lie and manipulate and use every trick in her book. But we had the truth on our side, and we had each other. We had a promise from beyond the grave, and we were not going to let it die with our grandmother. We were going to fight for her, for us, for a future we were meant to have. The courtroom was a sterile, unforgiving place. It was a space designed for facts, not feelings, and as we sat there, waiting for the proceedings to begin, the cold reality of it all washed over me. This was it. Our family's most painful secrets were about to be laid bare for all to see. The entire family was there, a divided group of supporters and silent skeptics. Sarah, dressed in a conservative suit, sat at her table with her lawyer, a woman with a face as hard and unyielding as a marble statue. Sarah looked composed, calm. It was a mask, I knew, but it was a good one. The judge, a man with a tired face and a kind voice, began the proceedings. Our lawyer, a formidable woman named Evelyn, started with the opening statement. She spoke not just about the numbers and the legal terms, but about my grandmother, about the kind of woman she was, and her deep, abiding love for her family. She told the court about the promise my grandmother had made to us, about the inheritance she had set aside for our education and our future. She painted a beautiful, poignant picture of a kind woman, and I felt the lump form in my throat. Then it was Sarah's turn. Her lawyer, a man with a slick smile and an even slicker suit, stood up. He painted a completely different picture. He portrayed Sarah as a selfless caregiver, a loving daughter who had sacrificed her own life to care for her ailing mother. He spoke of our greed, our entitlement, our desire to take advantage of a kind, generous woman. He said we were only interested in the money and that we were trying to slander a loving daughter. Then, the testimonies began. Our lawyer called my cousin Mark to the stand. He was nervous at first, his hands shaking, but as he began to talk about my grandmother, about her love for his art, he grew more confident. He spoke about his last visit, about how Sarah was always hovering, always in the way. He was a perfect witness, his testimony filled with emotion and a quiet, undeniable truth. Sarah's lawyer, however, was ruthless. He tried to discredit him, to paint him as a struggling artist who was only in it for the money. Next was Chloe. She spoke with a teacher's clarity, her voice filled with a quiet dignity. She talked about the last few months of my grandmother's life, how she had seemed so distant, so withdrawn. She spoke about her own financial struggles and how she was counting on my grandmother's promise to help her pay off her student loans. Sarah's lawyer was brutal. He accused her of being a liar and a cheat, of trying to get money for her own selfish desires. But we stood our ground. We told our story, not just with words, but with our hearts. We showed them the old will, the bank statements, the list of her sold possessions. We were a family divided, but in that courtroom, we were united by a single, powerful truth. We were not fighting for money. We were fighting for my grandmother. We were fighting for her legacy, and we were not going to stop until we had one. The courtroom was electric. The quiet hum of the air conditioning was the only sound as our lawyer, Evelyn, stood to deliver her final blow. She held the bank records and the old will in her hands, but I knew those were just props. The real star of her show was the final piece of evidence, the one we had been saving for last. "Your Honor," Evelyn said, her voice clear and strong. "We have proven through a paper trail of financial transactions and the testimonies of my clients that the defendant, Sarah Jenkins, systematically manipulated and took advantage of her mother. We have also shown that the last will and testament was signed on a day when the deceased was heavily medicated and not lucid." Sarah's lawyer stood up, a sneer on his face. "Objection, Your Honor. The defense has no proof that my client's mother was under the influence of any medication at the time of the signing. This is all hearsay." Evelyn just smiled. "We have more than hearsay, Your Honor. We have proof." She then presented a file to the court, a file that contained a home security video. Sarah went pale, her face a mask of terror and disbelief. She didn't know about the cameras, the ones my grandmother had installed after a string of robberies in the neighborhood. They were small, almost invisible, and they had captured everything. The judge ordered the video to be played. The courtroom fell silent as a small, grainy image appeared on the screen. It was my grandmother's living room, and it was the day the will was signed. Sarah was there, and a notary was standing next to her. My grandmother was in her armchair, her eyes glassy and unfocused. She was a ghost of her former self, a sad, empty shell. "This is all a lie," Sarah shrieked, jumping up from her chair. "This is a setup." But the video kept playing. We watched in horror as Sarah took my grandmother's hand in hers, guiding it to the paper. We watched as she whispered in her ear, "This is what you want, Mom. You want to make sure I'm taken care of." Her voice was a chilling mix of false concern and cold manipulation. It was a horrifying sight, a brutal reality of what my grandmother had endured. The video was a final, undeniable truth, a glimpse into a world of lies and betrayal that had been hidden for so long. When the video ended, the room was a whirlwind of motion. Sarah was sobbing, her composure completely shattered. Her lawyer tried to object, but it was useless. The truth was out. The judge, his face filled with a grim understanding, called for a recess. As we walked out of the courtroom, my family and I were a tangle of tears and shaky hugs. It was over. We had won. The verdict was not even announced yet, but we knew it was over. Sarah's web of lies had unraveled, and in its place was a terrible, beautiful truth. We had gotten justice for our grandmother. We had honored her memory. We had won the battle. The judge's verdict was a final, undeniable truth. The will, signed under undue influence, was invalid. The inheritance, our grandmother's legacy, was returned to us. The victory felt hollow at first, a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. Sarah was a ghost, a disgraced figure who had lost everything. But the real win wasn't in the courtroom. It was in what came next. The weeks that followed were a quiet, peaceful blur. We started to heal. The family, once fractured, began to mend. The money, the thing that had caused so much pain and division, was now a symbol of our unity. We all sat together, not as adversaries, but as a family, and we decided on the best way to honor our grandmother's wishes. Chloe, the teacher, used her portion to pay off her student loans, a burden that had been hanging over her for years. The relief in her eyes was palpable. She had her freedom back, and with it, the energy to pour all her love and passion into her students. She started a program at her school to help low-income students with their college applications, a beautiful tribute to our grandmother's belief in education. Mark, the artist, used his inheritance to open a small art gallery. It wasn't about the money, it was about the art. He used the gallery as a space for local artists to showcase their work, giving them the same encouragement my grandmother had given him. He held an exhibition in her honor, a beautiful collection of pieces that told her story, and he dedicated it to the woman who had always believed in his talent. As for me, I used my share to help my parents. They had been so stressed, so burdened by the weight of the lawsuit. I helped them pay off their mortgage and sent them on a long overdue vacation. I wanted them to have the peace they deserved. But the most meaningful part of the inheritance was the house. Grandma Rose's house. We decided not to sell it. It was too full of memories, too full of her love. Instead, we turned it into a family retreat, a place where we could all come together and remember the woman who had loved us so fiercely. A year passed. The pain of the lawsuit was now a distant memory, replaced by a deep sense of gratitude. The last scene of our story takes place in Grandma Rose's garden, a place that had always been her sanctuary. It was filled with roses, their petals a vibrant display of life and color. We were all there, a family, not just by blood, but by choice. We had fought for each other, and we had won. We talked and laughed, sharing stories of our grandmother, of the life we had almost lost. We were a different family now, stronger, more honest. The betrayal, the pain, the public spectacle, it had all served a purpose. It had brought us closer. It had taught us that true family is about more than just a last name. It's about fighting for each other, no matter the cost. I walked to the center of the garden, a small, elegant rose in my hand. I looked at my cousins, my family, and a sense of profound peace washed over me. We had not just won a legal battle. We had won back our honor. We had given our grandmother the legacy she had always wanted for us. It wasn't about the money. It was about her love, a love that had outlived her, a love that had brought us together and made us stronger. We were her roses, blooming in the sunlight, a beautiful testament to a battle won from beyond the grave. Thank you for watching. This story was the hardest thing my family and I have ever been through, but we fought for each other and for my grandma's honor. If you've ever had a family experience that felt like a movie, I want to hear your story. Leave a comment down below and let me know. And if this story inspired you to fight for what's right, please give this video a thumbs up. To make sure you don't miss our next story, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. We're not just a channel, we're a community, and I can't wait to hear from you.